everybody. I'm glad you could come. I'm hoping I'm speaking to the right kind of people here who are interested in the future, interested in flexible learning, and interested in how we actually get there. So, my name is Paula. I'm from the University of Derby, and I'm currently running a QAA Collaborative Enhancement project. This project aims to design a flexible learning toolkit for the sector to be able to use. So it should be some free resources to start moving and thinking about flexible learning for the future. Now, I'm here to ask the question, can maps influence the quality of flexible learning? And unsurprisingly, my answer to that question is, I think yes. Now, if that's answered your question, you perhaps don't want to stay for the next 20 minutes. However, if you do want to listen to how I believe that pedagogical mapping can help to make flexible learning more visible and meet the quality standards expected, then the next 20 minutes might be quite useful for you. So before I enter into a discussion about the mapping, I should have had a co-colleague join me from the QAA today, Amrita, but unfortunately she's not in this country. In fact, she's not even in this time zone. So she sent a video for you to watch, and we'll move on to that next.
I must apologize. I'm not able to attend the conference in person as I am in a different country in a different time zone altogether. However, I do take this opportunity to talk about the role of quality and standards in digital and blended delivery in higher education and ways in which QAA has supported its members through the COVID-19 pandemic. QAA works for and with higher education sector to safeguard academic standards, enhance quality of student learning experience to promote the global reputation of UK higher education. COVID-19 presented us with many challenges at the start of the pandemic, but there were also opportunities for the sector. With the pivot to the online teaching, learning and assessment at the start of the pandemic to developing hybrid, blended and flexible delivery patterns as we emerge from it, we have continued to learn, adapt and evolve our approach. Digital transformation in learning and teaching will continue to develop that suits each higher education institution's strategic aims and practices. High quality learning, teaching and assessment practices are key to ensure that students get a meaningful experience of higher education. So from a QAA perspective, we have continued to work across the UK and in partnership with universities, colleges, specialist institutions and independent providers in each nation. Throughout the pandemic, QAA has supported the sector with guidance and a variety of supporting resources, online events and professional development programs. Maintaining academic integrity and securing academic standards of awards remains a top priority for the sector. Establishing the Academic Integrity Charter, which currently has 184 signatories across UK, QAA works in partnership with member institutions to uphold assessment policies and strategies that promote good academic practices and reduce academic misconduct, such as the use of the essay mills or contract cheating. We are pleased with the forthcoming legislation aimed at outlawing essay mills in England, which will help to curtail the activities of these organizations without criminalizing students. Getting to the stage of legislation is a key achievement for the sector and our policy work supported by our excellent Academic Integrity Advisory Group. We supplemented our policy influencing activities with practical projects and support for providers. So for example, creating advice on digital proctoring services, sharing approaches to assessment online that makes instances of academic misconduct less likely, highlighting signs to look out for an essay mill, which may have been used to complete the assessed work, and identifying the range of practices in place across the sector for managing cases of academic misconduct. Looking towards the future of higher education in post-pandemic, it is clear that the role of student voice is central to the quality of learning and teaching experience. While we know students and many staff miss the in-person activity, we also know that there are strong pedagogical reasons for including digital and hybrid delivery as part of our mix. Evidence from a wide range of student surveys and institutional case studies do suggest that student satisfaction appears to be correlated with their experience of enhanced digital delivery practices. When students have the opportunity to experience different forms of enhanced digital delivery, they find them to be a more positive addition to their experience and express a desire for those practices in some form to continue in future as well. At QAA, we are keen to continue championing student engagement through our work. Students partner us with a range of material. So for example, the student engagement toolkit, hallmarks of success playbooks, and student transition resources, as well as being key members of advisory committees, such as our subject benchmark statement advisory groups and academic integrity advisory groups mentioned earlier. In addition to our membership offer, last year, we also launched our first funded collaborative enhancement project in 2020. This QAA initiative offers funded opportunities for higher education institutions to work together and develop projects that ultimately benefit the wider QAA membership and, of course, the higher education sector. So on this note, I would like to hand over to Paula, who will share more about the project aimed at creating flexible learning toolkits to enhance module design to provide an engaging, flexible learning opportunities for students. Thank you for listening to me, and over to you, Paula.
So, we've just heard from Amrita there from the QAA talking about their role in helping to securing standards and quality enhancement of particularly digital education. But of course, the QAA isn't the only actor in this arena that we have to be aware of. The Office for Students is relaunching their Teaching Excellence Framework, and they're particularly going to be on the lookout for low-quality courses. And the Department for Education for several years has been asking us to define what works, evaluate, research and test it. And coming soon, they will be launching their lifelong learning entitlement by 2025, and in particular looking at micro-credentialing. But rather than considering this as a sector issue, or even an internal management issue, if you were a learning designer or somebody at the coalface of teaching and learning, how do you ensure that the designs that you are creating for the classroom are meeting these quality standards? And I'd like to return to that question at the end of this session. So, as Amrita said, we can learn an awful lot about students' experiences from the COVID 2 years that we've just been through. In fact, 2 years almost to the day. So what did we learn about our student and staff experiences of digital learning? Well, if I stick with synchronicity first, our campus-based students that we studied told us that they missed those face-to-face interactions. They missed those opportunities to create friendships, to get that sense of belonging, and there's the potential long tail of mental health issues that will continue to come from that. But they also said there are elements of digital learning they desperately want to keep. They told us that meetings were more effective, more efficient online, and recording lecture sessions enabled them to go back and revisit the learning over and over again. So there are many things that they wish to keep. However, there is a synchronicity paradox. They also told us that they wanted a choice as to whether they were visible and heard, often citing issues of privacy about using webcams and microphones. And yet, on the other side of this argument, they want to see and hear their peers. And often academics said it was like teaching to avoid. But in particular, an interesting aspect of this was the chat function. And the chat function seemed to level the playing field, and students felt that their voices were heard through this. So that's certainly something to learn from this experience. Now, online students, and that's my particular area of interest, were not exempt from this synchronicity paradox. Of course, they were introduced to so much more Zooming in the countries and in the UK where they lived, and they've been asking for far more synchronicity in their online learning. However, how do you handle that over 3 different time zones? Now, the asynchronous arena was even more complex. Academics told us about the barrage of emails that were absolutely overloading during this period of time. And students told us that the quick transition to online meant that the resources that were uploaded were disjointed, they felt disconnected from their assessments, and actually it was quite overwhelming. Tools that we use for small classroom interventions were not considered when they were then scaled up. And of course, there was a disconnect then about small-scale interventions and using the tools with larger groups. All in all, this made flexibility overflow and become quite chaotic. Now, many of the learnings that we have found during the pandemic are hosted in a MOOC, a free MOOC, which I'll give you the information for at the end of this session, and certainly you can read more about that time then. So, how do we calm the waters? How do we make flexible learning both visible and usable? Well, we started work in this project on MAPIT, a module activity plan with interactive timetables. We place evidence, student voice on one side. We map the module in the middle, rather like an underground map, and we identify the quantities of time so that it makes flexible learning both holistic and credible in the long term. So let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. Universities are collecting data constantly about the student experience. Module evaluations are taking place on a regular and continuous basis. So grabbing that data, discussing it and creating a RAG status against each of those different elements of learning is the first step. The next step is then to map each of the different types of learning. So on this example here, you can see we've identified different types of learning: direct contact, indirect contact, engaging with assessment and feedback, guided study resources, self-directed study, and on-the-job work experience, particularly interesting if you are working with apprentices. Mapping the learning throughout a module and identifying the interventions that are relevant to improve will make the flexible learning much more visible. Now, the next question is, well, how do you know what interventions to make? Where is the evidence, as the Department for Education would say, to say that doing this activity will make a difference? Often the data we collect is too low level and too small scale to make large scale interventions. So alongside this toolkit, we've been creating a large evidence base, which will be part of the toolkit, which you can search based on research and data and evidence internationally, so that it will help you to make informed choices. And so the final bit of MAPIT is to create a ratio of time. Again, very useful for if you are working with apprenticeship students, where you've got to map the 20% off the job and the 80% on the job. What does that actually look like? So working out the ratio of time of these different types of flexible learning will give you a more coherent view of a module. And so, if you put your understanding of your students' experience, the areas that need to be improved with a RAG status, against the interventions that you intend to make and the ratio of time, you get a more holistic view of the flexible learning. Reading along the lines, you'll be able to see where the interventions map against the areas of improvement. Reading down the lines, you'll be able to see the extent of a weekly workload and also identify whether you are overloading students in a particular week. Now, this isn't just a UK issue. There's been a lot of talk about mapping internationally and thinking about that future ecosystem of flexible learning going forward. And so mapping the micro, the things that you do in the classroom, to the meso, what your managers want you to be able to visualise, to the macro environment, what the QAA, the Office for Students, and the Department for Education wants you to achieve, is going to be very important for the future. And so, possibly the thing that you've been waiting for the last 20 minutes is, so where do I get hold of this toolkit? How can I access these resources? Well, the project isn't quite finished yet. It finishes in the summer, but we're uploading resources now as we go along, and you'll be able to access a self-development MOOC to understand what students went through during the COVID pandemic and our recommendations for digital and flexible learning. You'll be able to access the start of an evidence base with a further evidence base coming by the summer. You'll be able to access the MAPIT template, so you can have a go at the mapping yourself, and we will be adding some examples of mapped modules with some narrative as we go along. And you can access them all through one of our partners' links, who are Pearson, here. So I'd like to thank our other partners who've been part of this project, and of course there's the QR code there to access the Flexible Learning Toolkit. There is a discussion forum there as well, so please do feel free to contact us to ask us how we are continuing to develop these resources going forward. And so I return to the question that I asked partway through this presentation. And this is a question perhaps you'll want to ponder going forward. So are you sure that you are producing flexible modules that meet those quality standards? Thank you very much.